So aren't foster care and adoption like pretty much the same thing? No, not even close. I'll go into the differences between foster care and adoption, so stick around. Hi friends, I'm Anna Leonora, and together with my husband Jason, we are foster parents in real life. And here on my YouTube channel, From the Fosters, we do foster parenting life together and raise awareness for the foster care system. So if any of that interests you, please consider liking my video below and subscribing to my channel for more from me and to join my growing cyber family here on YouTube. So I'm not going to go into a big detailed description of what exactly the foster care system is because I already did that in my video titled, What is Foster Care? So if you're interested in checking that one out before this one, you're welcome to go look at that one and watch it all the way through and get a big long description about exactly what foster care is. I will link that video down below. But for these, for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to touch on a couple of the key differences between foster care and adoption. So the first big difference between foster care and adoption is that foster care is meant to be temporary. So there are children who age out of the foster care system. It's unfortunate. There needs to be some reform within the foster care system. But for the most part, foster care is temporary. It is the temporary removal of a child from their biological family when a situation is deemed by the state to be unsafe for that child. Okay? So it is temporary. Typically, reunification with biological parents or bio families is the goal. We want children to be with their biological families, but we want them to be with their biological families when it is safe for those children to do so. So the first big difference is foster care is temporary because even if the children do not get reunified, if the parents' rights get terminated and they become free and clear for adoption, then either those children will be adopted by or guardianship will be taken over from kinship or other members of their family who are deemed safe that they can go to, or the child will be adopted by their foster parent or some other adoptive parent, and then that becomes their permanency. So adoption, on the other hand, is permanent. In the eyes of the law, that child becomes the adoptive parents legally. They are their child. On the birth certificate, forever and ever, that is their parent once there is an adoption. So that's a big difference. Foster care is temporary, adoption is permanent. So the other part to that difference between foster care and adoption is that in foster care, the goal is to get the children back with their biological parents when it's safe to do so. In adoption, the biological parents' rights have either been terminated by the courts or the biological parents have voluntarily signed their rights over, and that is permanent. So those parents, bio parents, no longer have any rights to that child and cannot get those rights back. So in foster care, the child is just temporarily removed from their bio parents, but bio parents still maintain some rights to the child, medical rights, educational rights, and DSS just has temporary custody. But in adoption, the bio parents' rights are permanently severed to that child, whether voluntarily or by the courts. In foster care, the children can go to either kinship families, which are other members of their family or close family friends, people that already have a relationship with the child. But DSS does vet them out. They do a home visit and a background check just to make sure that these are safe individuals for the child to go to. Or if there are no safe kinship families identified, they will go to a licensed foster family, people who are licensed through the state and through an agency, whether that be directly through the county's DSS or through a private agency, but who are deemed by the state as safe individuals to care for these children. In adoption, the child often goes to the adoptive parents, and once the adoption's final, they stay there, just like a bio child would. Once they're in your home, that adoption's final, they're with you for forever. There's not much more to it than that. With the adoption, there are three of the most common or most talked about types that I will touch on. There is domestic adoption, international adoption, and adoption through foster care. So in a domestic adoption, the adoptive parents and the bio parents or bio mother usually are through an agency, and it can either be an open adoption or a closed adoption. The bio mother can go through adoptive parents' profiles and handpick a family that she would like to adopt her child, or she can just ask the agency to make a selection and a fit that they think would be right and have them do it. In an open adoption, bio parents and adoptive parents have access to each other's information so they can maintain a relationship, and the bio parents can have a relationship with the child to the extent that the parties agree on. And in a closed adoption, the adoptive parents know nothing about the biological family, and the biological family knows nothing about the adoptive family. So the biological family does not continue to have a relationship with the child at all. An international adoption is when the adoptive families go through an agency to another country, and typically they're adopting children out of an orphanage. So they're going through an agency, they're doing a lot of paperwork, they've got to travel to the other country. The adopting country has to agree to the adoption. So it's not just that the agency has to license the adoptive parents. The country in which the parents are adopting from have to also agree to the adoption. And adopting from foster care is a little bit different. So children come into foster care. Typically, reunification is the number one goal. Birth parents are given a plan to work, a case plan to work. They're not given a specific set amount of time to work that plan, but it's not indefinite because, again, foster care is meant to be temporary. So bio parents either choose to work or not work their plan, and sometimes they'll work part of their plan and not other parts of the plan. If after a certain amount of time, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it really depends on the circumstances of the case, the state, the county, all of that, how much the parents have worked or have not worked the plan. But after a certain period of time, if it appears that the biological parents are not going to be able to provide a safe, stable home for that child, and there's no safe, stable kinship for the child to go to, then the plan can change to adoption, but not until the parental rights are terminated. There is a court case for termination of parental rights where social services is able to present all the data and evidence that they have, and biological parents are allowed to present their data and evidence as well, and a judge can determine to sever the parental rights. Once the parental rights are severed, that is permanent. Biological parents can appeal that. Again, the circumstances of the appeal depend on the county and the state. Biological parents can appeal it, but if the appeal is denied and the termination stands, termination of parental rights is permanent. Those biological parents cannot ever get those children back, period. So then that child becomes free and clear for adoption. And again, if there's no kinship is the first choice. If there's no kinship available to take the child, then the next first choice goes to the family who has been fostering that child. So the foster parents of that child get to decide if they want to adopt the child or not. Often foster parents will, because they don't want to further traumatize the child by having them rehomed and have to go to another family again. But there are some foster parents who are only in fostering to foster. They do not want to adopt. And that's okay too, because if you start to adopt kids, often once you've adopted enough kids, you can't really continue to foster because your home is full. Your home and your life is full. So there are some foster parents who just want to foster so that they can continue to help children for years and years and years to come. And so if the foster parents do not choose to adopt that child, then the agency will go start looking for other foster parents, other licensed individuals who do want to adopt and who might be a good fit for that child. Once an adoption happens from foster care, it is final, just like other forms of adoption. Once an adoption happens, that child is legally that adoptive parent's child. So the adoptive parents, whether it was the foster parents or not, their name goes on the birth certificate, and that becomes their child. and that child is no longer in the foster care system. They are no longer a foster child. They have been adopted. That is permanent, and they now have their permanent family. Domestic and international adoption can run a really high price tag. So I have heard on the very low end, a domestic adoption for $15,000, but I've heard on the high end, $40,000 or $50,000 for some international adoptions. And that's not just for the adoption itself, for the home study, it's kind of everything that's involved with it. The home studies, the agency fees, the lawyer fees, the court fees, everything. So there's a lot of money involved in adoption. Between a domestic adoption and an international adoption, there's a lot of money. And not everyone has that kind of money to adopt a child. But adoption through foster care is free. Yes, adoption through foster care is free. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to spend any money at all, because in order to adopt from foster care, you have to become a licensed foster parent, where you have to pay for like your background check, which I think is like $25. You have to pay for getting your home ready. So if you need any furniture in the house, if you need to baby-proof the house, things like that. But that's not very expensive. It doesn't cost much money. But the adoption itself, the lawyer is taken care of by the county, and the adoption itself is free. So that's another kind of difference there, is that international and domestic adoption can cost a lot of money. And of course, that's worth it for the families that want to go that route, but adoption through foster care is free. So as you can see, there are some pretty big differences between foster care and adoption. And really the only similarity is that a child is living with a family who is not their natural born family, or is not their natural born parents. Maybe they're living with an aunt or a grandmom in foster care through kinship, but they're not living with their natural born parents. That's really the biggest and main similarity between the two, but there are a lot of differences otherwise. But there's also a little bit of overlap in that you can adopt from foster care. It's just a little bit of a different situation. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a foster parent or about the foster care system, then I encourage you to look up the foster care system in your county. You can check out adoptuskids.org, which I will link below. And you can consider subscribing to my channel From the Fosters, because foster parenting life is what we do here, and we raise awareness for the foster care system. As always, friends, until next time, go out and shine your light into the world.